Hello and welcome to part 2 of Mastering Loan Conditions. So we're going to go over conditional loan approvals today, and what's exciting about today is we're going to look at actual case studies. So I'm going to show you conditional loan approvals and walk you through how to read them. But before we jump into part 2, we need to recap part 1. So in part 1, we went over understanding the why behind each condition, building a game plan and strategy on how to approach your conditions, and then communication with your team players. That includes your loan processor, underwriter, any managers in your office that could help. And that's what we did in part 1. So check out that video if you haven't already. All right, so before I show you the actual case studies, I'm going to tell you what we're going to break down. We're going to go over the conditional loan approvals and look at what's being requested, why is it being requested, who might be responsible for the condition. Is it something that you're going to get, the customer? Is it something your processor should handle, a third party? I'll talk to you about where people get confused, how to get things resolved, and also how to keep track of those conditions. All right, so first up, what do these things look like? Well, they look like different things. They look different depending on the lender. So here's just a few examples. Of course, I have redacted these conditional loan approvals to take out any identifying information in terms of lenders as well as customers. So there's a lot of information that's missing, but gives you an idea to let you know that they can look differently depending on where you work. If you work for a brokerage, you work in wholesale, then you may get different conditional loan approvals on every different loan because you're working with different lenders. If you work for one particular lender, then your conditional loan approvals should all look the same in terms of format. It's just the conditions will vary from loan to loan. All right. Here are some of the common sections that you see on a conditional loan approval. So you'll see a loan summary, the details about the loan. That includes the loan amount, any contacts on the loan. So underwriter, there might be an account manager. You might have your closer for some reason that's on there. So they'll put different details as well as contacts on your conditional loan approval. And what's handy about that is if you do have questions, then you know who to reach out for answers because it will have their name, phone number, and email address usually. And then, again, this is depending on your lender, but a lot of times your conditional loan approval is broken down into sections. So the prior to approval condition section means that these items need to be provided, collected before the underwriter can officially approve the loan. So you may receive a conditional loan approval that's actually not an approval. It's just a condition sheet, and they may use the term suspended. They may use the term incomplete. And until you provide those prior to approval conditions, you can't actually say it's approved. Now, the other prior to typically mean your loan is approved. Now, it's a conditional approval, but it's better news. And prior to docs means all those conditions need to be received, collected, and approved before loan documents can be issued, before the customer can sign their final loan papers. Prior to closing conditions work similar. So depending on your lender or your brokerage, prior to doc and prior to closing might be similar. So they just might use different terms. So one lender might say prior to doc, another lender might say prior to closing, but typically what that means is you cannot proceed to having the customer sign their loan papers with the notary until the PTDs or PTCs are resolved. Now, prior to funding means your customer could sign documents, they could meet with the notary, but the loan cannot officially close It cannot fund. The customer cannot get their keys. The transaction cannot be recorded until these items are taken care of. And then there are also, not all the time, but sometimes you'll see post-closing conditions. So these are conditions that after it's closed, they need to see these items. You might think, well, how can they request things if the loan's already closed? I mean, isn't that too late? They may get a loan based on a new job that they have. So they have a new job. They have an offer letter. The employer has confirmed, yeah, they work here. They just started last week. We're going to pay them this salary every 2 weeks, every month, what have you, but they don't yet have a pay stub. So one of the post-closing conditions could be the underwriter says, I'm going to let you close, but you need to send us your very first pay stub once you receive it. Also, if you're working on loans that are renovation loans, remodel loans, escrow holdback loans, where there has to be some kind of repair done, but they are going to allow the transaction to close, and the repair has to be done once the buyer becomes the new owner. Then they have to repair something, and they have to then send in the proof that that's been repaired. All right. So let's go into example number 1. Okay, this is our first example. So I've already sort of started making some notes on this one. And what I recommend is, as you're first starting out, you may want to print these out. It depends on how you learn. So I recommend either printing it out, or you can, if you're comfortable making notes on like a PDF copy and you have the tools to do that, you could do that as well. But I like to have like a pen and a highlighter, so that way, I can make notes and know what I'm going to be following up on. Also, as part of your condition, I explained to you that it has some basic information on here. So it has like loan amount, the interest rate. Important thing to know is when does it expire, because you want to make sure that you're adhering to this deadline, so whatever that deadline is, May 2nd in this case. And this is a purchase. So we want to know when the contract date is that we are closing. So these are some dates that you have to be mindful of. It also gives you some contact information on this condition sheet. So we've got our underwriter, we've got our account manager, has their phone number and email address. And this is helpful in case you have any questions, especially if you're newer to doing this. You can certainly reach out and say, hey, I'm new, this is my first conditional approval, and can I go over it with you? And hopefully they would be amenable to that. But you can certainly reach out to your processor. So if you have a loan processor, you can go over the conditions with them as well. What I like to do is go through, and I have my own little kind of code of what I put on there. So you could come up with your own system. But Q for me would be a question. Anything that's highlighted is something I'm responsible for. So I'm going to go back to the client, to the borrower, and make sure I gather these things. And then anything that's with a P is typically the processor is going to handle that. So you may not know what the processor is responsible for and what you are responsible for. So when you're first starting out and you get your conditional loan approval, it's best to set up a time with your processor when they have about 5 or 10 minutes and say, can we please go over the conditional loan approval? Now, some processors prefer to say, hey, I want to read through it first, then I can get together with you. And that's fine too. So as long as they're, going over it with you and that there's an understanding of who's responsible for what. So this first condition on here was, please provide updated mortgage rating showing all payments after December 2024 have been made on time. And the reason I have a question here is this something that I need to get from the borrower, or is the processor going to go ahead and request a mortgage rating from the credit report company? And that's called a credit supplement. If that's the case, then, this Q turns into a P. But then I have, please provide the reconsideration of value form executed by the borrowers with the initial disclosure package. So this was a form that got missed, so we can certainly get that form signed by the borrower. And then they have, this was a condition that was added that shows that an inquiry, this is a credit inquiry or inquiry, was done. And so they need a letter from the borrower stating that there is no new debt resulting from this report or from this, inquiry. Then I have a few conditions here that, based on my relationship with the processor, they're going to take care of. They're going to take care of the closing disclosure request form, anything from the settlement agent, the title company, the insurance company, they're going to take care of that. Invoices, they're going to take care of that. Closing protection letter, this is a title condition, so I'm going to put that this is a P. That's for the processor to take care of. The appraisal. So it says proof the appraisal was delivered and received by the borrower. So some companies have a system where they automatically send it to the borrower and they have email proof. Otherwise, your processor may come to you and say, hey, I need proof that you emailed the appraisal to the borrower and that, that they've had 3 days to review it. So this is where you'll need to ask for a question of who's responsible for that condition. The appraisal has to be in, verifications of employment, things with insurance. These are all processor. Purchase contract, same thing. Now, the processor may need your help. If they contact the settlement agent and say, hey, we need something corrected on the purchase contract, and the settlement agent or the escrow officer says, well, we need the real estate agents to let us know, this needs to be corrected or there needs to be an amendment, then this is something where you may need to loop in your loan officer unless they've given you permission to contact real estate agents directly. So this is another kind of question, but it also might be something that you highlight. This is for real estate agents maybe, so we're going to make a question there. So any kind of notes, you can certainly mark up your condition sheet. Appraisal has to be approved. These are some appraisal forms, the SSRs. And then this is a duplicate. This is that mortgage rating again. It might be for a different mortgage. So it's the same as above. So you can see we have this kind of pattern here of going here and marking what do you need to take care of, what do you have questions on, and any, applicable notes that you want to add there. And these are all prior to doc conditions. So all of these need to be taken care of. And one thing you can do is, as the loan officer assistant, you're making sure everything closes. So although these have P's in front of them, you want to double check with the processor. Did you get everything you needed? Is there anything I can help with? Double check. I assume you're taking care of conditions 2 through 6, as well as, 9, 10, and 14. So are you taking care of those? That's one thing. Then on the flip side, or it might be page 2, it continues with the list, and then you've got at closing conditions. So these are conditions where your loan documents have been signed. We now want to close the transaction, and these, unless you see something kind of odd, these are usually taken care of automatically. The final closing disclosure. The seller or any third parties cannot have credits more than, $61,000. That's a lot of money. But right now, it has 0 credits from the seller or real estate agents on the contract. So if that changes, you may want to double check that condition. No subordinate financing, meaning no second mortgages. And then this gives you the dates of when things expire. So the credit report expires in May. These don't have dates just yet. And then the title company, their title report expires in June. So these are, if you have dates all filled in here, this is another thing to be mindful of. Say their income expired, I don't know, April something. you would then need to get updated pay stubs so that the underwriter could update that date. Okay, so it looks like the underwriter hasn't fully filled in everything. The principal, interest, taxes, and insurance not to exceed, they haven't filled that in yet. And the cash from the borrower not to exceed, this hasn't been filled in yet. And that's because it's a conditional approval, or maybe there are certain things outstanding. And then in this case, the borrower is getting a gift of $150,000. So we need to make sure that this is executed correctly, that the final settlement statement shows $150,000 gift from the donor, whether that be the parents or grandparents, and then a copy of the cashier's check or the wire receipt showing their name on it, as well as the last 4 or 5 digits of the account number so that it matches up with the gift letter. Here is example number 2. Okay, we've got another one here. Remember, I've got my pen and my highlighter, and I've already marked this one up, so I'm going to go through this one a little bit faster. But wanted to point out again, this has the contact information. So it has, I'm the loan officer, so it has my information. And then it has the underwriter's name, the account executive, and then contact information there as well. And then it even has a deadline here that everything provided below needs to be in within 20 days of the approval date. So that's something that you can mark on your calendar. And it has all the loan details for you. It has some dates. So this was a loan that we got approval, but it wasn't yet locked. And so there's certain things that are outstanding, but you can kind of see here. What I like about this sheet is it actually has these expiration dates. So it says, we're trying to close by 4/29. The credit report is good until July 1st. The income is good until also 4/29. So we're going to make sure we close on time. Some of the other things are still outstanding. So until we get everything in, the underwriter wasn't able to fill in all of these dates. Okay, so this is the prior to final approval, or PTD. We talked about that before. So loan documents cannot go out until all of these things are in. And let me show you the other side. So it continues on to page number 2. As you can see, I've started marking my notes. And then we've got at closing. So they just put AC. Sometimes people put PTC, prior to closing. But these are the things that are right at closing need to be done. And some of these things, the underwriters even put TBD because they didn't have enough information to fill that in yet. And then prior to funding, so it has the closing attorney information, and then there's several things TBD. So this is the first time we've gotten this sheet because this was very, very early on in the process. So once more things have been given to the underwriter, you're going to want to go back through the second time that they send this sheet and double check the things that were marked TBD to make sure that there's nothing that you need to be aware of at closing or at funding. Okay, so I've marked some of these things, and this is what's great about this condition sheet too, is it has different sections, assets, credit, income, etc. So I've marked on here the things that are highlighted. I'm going to have to get with the customer about these things. So providing 2 monthly bank statements to show the withdrawal of the EMD. This is the earnest money deposit. So they had to put in $24,000 and we need to track where that money came from. We also didn't have their ID up front. They haven't even signed the initial loan application. So this is very, very early on. We also need to provide an explanation of there was an address that needed to be explained. And then here it says verification of rent. So I have a queue here because I'm going to check with my processor and ask them, are they going to order this verification of rent, or am I doing that with the loan officer? So I need to know about that. We might need to get a copy of the lease plus 12 months canceled checks. So this is something I want to cover with the processor just to make sure we're on the same page about this. And then the rest of these are highlighted because I know I'm going to go over those with the customer. And same thing here. This says underwriter to verify. So this is not for me to do, but it's just something to be aware of. The underwriter is going to verify that their business is existing, that they're going to pull like their business license, or they're going to do an online search to make sure that the business that they have is in existence. And so there's some other things that I need to get from the customer, or there's some things I have to get from their accountant. So I will still need to contact the customer, say, do I have permission to contact your accountant? So that way I can request certain letters from them. And then the rest of these, I put a bunch of P's. You know, these are the P's for the processor to take care of. The processor needs to order the hazard insurance or get with the escrow company about it. But I want to confirm that the quote for the homeowner's insurance is in. So the quote would come from the client. So that's just something I need to confirm. I can also highlight that, I guess. Now let's see, confirm that the HOA quote is in. Okay, so I have that. And then I have a question here. Provide evidence that the appraisal was delivered to the borrower. So I think I covered this in the one of the other examples. I need to confirm, is this automatically sent from the appraisal portal, or do I need to email this and save a copy of the email, or is the processor doing that? So I have a question. Oh, here I put may need to contact the borrower. So please confirm proposed title vesting. So vesting is how they are going to appear on the title. So they may be married man, sole and separate. They may be husband and wife. They may be, you know, I don't know, single woman. So the client stipulates how they want to appear on the title, and they need to provide that to either the title company or the escrow company, depending on your state. And so sometimes the customers are not clear what to pick. So I may need to contact them just to confirm, hey, have you picked what your vesting is? And if they say, I don't know what to pick, you can send them maybe some resources. We can't tell them what to pick because we're not an attorney, but we can send them some resources or advise them to ask their attorney about it. All right, that is example number 2. So let me walk you through the conditions on this one. Final example here, this first page kind of looks like a letter. You know, it has congratulations, your loan application has been approved. Attached is a list of the conditions. It has the summary here of like the loan information, the loan amount, the price, the interest rate. It has the approval date and the approval expiration date. And then here's the contact information down here below of the underwriter, you know, which I redacted. So that's the first page, very formal looking letter. So the only circumstance I would say that you might want to use something like this is you had to clear contingencies, and the agent, one of the real estate agents, wants to see like an approval letter. You could send them something like this. I would redact the underwriter's information. They shouldn't be contacted by real estate agents. That's what you could kind of use this letter for, but otherwise you don't really need to use that letter. Then I have the other side. I have some different conditions on here. There's some conditions on here that says waived, but I'll show you later on. It looks like they're repeated, so I don't know if they were waived because they're duplicates. So I put the word, I put dupe. That's how I signal to myself that it's a duplicate. But these other conditions up here, like insurance, I put a P for processor, the settlement statement, I put P for processor, and copies of the invoices. So I put P for processor. The processor is going to take care of that. For the settlement statement, I did put a note to myself, balancing. With me and my team, this is an important thing for me, balancing, because for me, it's a customer service issue. I want to make sure that we're giving close to accurate numbers for the borrower to bring in for closing. In terms of balancing, I want to be aware of what the closing costs are, what's the balanced figures, even if some of them are still outstanding. That way I can educate the customer. I can let them know your closing figures could range from, here to here, give or take a few $100s or maybe $1,000 at the most. That way they are prepared for that. Then I have highlighted the things that I'm going to take up with the customer. So terms of withdrawal with their 401k, the AUS, which stands for Automated Underwriting System. So that could be DU, LPA, calls for 2 months of assets. And right now their Discover account does not show enough. So we need to get either more assets or an updated bank statement. This one also, the discover transaction history doesn't reflect the bank name, account number, etc. Then we've got some processor conditions, and then I did put a Q here. Oh, HOA. So they want the HOA certification, all the legal documents from the HOA. So I want to make sure that the processor has those things. Sometimes HOAs require that the buyer pay a fee in order to obtain these documents. So that's why I put a question here to double check with the processor. They either have all the documents they need, or if there's something I need to get with the customer on. Same thing here. This is a processor condition. Who is the current owner of the property? It's unclear because it looks like there was some transfer of ownership, and so it's kind of unclear. So I may need to loop in the agents on who the actual owner is and if there was some change of hands that makes things confusing to the underwriter. Same thing here. Is there a relationship between, and then I've highlighted here, bank statement to provide. There's a processor condition. I put the word title here because that still has to do with this research of the current owner. There was some confusion here on who owned the property, so we might have to loop in title. Processor's cash to close. I highlighted this for myself so that way I can make sure that when we're reviewing the settlement statement, when we're reviewing the balancing, we have to make sure that the closing doesn't go over $8,000. That's how much they can't bring in, more than $8,000, probably because of their assets, their bank statements. And then here's the second page here. Oh, there's 4 pages. Lord have mercy. All right, so we have here, I have another question about the termite, and that's because, yeah, it was waived over here. So it was waived on this page. So that's why I didn't know if it was a duplicate, or like, is it waived because it was a duplicate, or is it really waived? So we got to double check on that. Plus the termite report could come from either real estate agents, escrow company, settlement agent. So find out where that is. And then the processor should be taking care of any of like the community grant paperwork that was done. Again, here's the question again about the HOA stuff. So we have the Q there again. And then the rest of these are just funding conditions. So I just put check marks because these things should resolve themselves. But I did want to note all the expiration dates on here. When the credit report expires, the pay stubs, just to make sure that we're not going to be tight on time. So I still review this in case I need to let the customer know, hey, if we don't close by 10/28, we're going to need updated pay stubs from you. So, just be aware of that. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that was our third example. Now let's talk about some of our tips. So as we were going through those examples, I talked about what notes to take down. When you first get your conditional loan approval, and we talked about this in part 1, is take down those notes. This is your sheet. You can either print it out or you can do it electronically, but make sure you're keeping notes to help you remember things, but also to help with your own self-training. You also need to double check things. Don't take it for granted that someone else is going to actually do their responsibility. This is still a human business. As much as we have a lot more tech and automation, there are still things that could get missed. So it is important to double check. Now, what I recommend is that you double check every section prior to approval, prior to doc, or prior to closing, prior to funding, and even post-closing conditions, and do them all at once and make notes and keep track of how you're going to obtain those things. You don't want to get to the point, and I've told this cautionary tale before, you don't want to get to the point of funding and they say, oh, we need this final inspection report, when you could have ordered it days or weeks in advance because you knew that it was going to be needed. And then use templates. You can have commonly asked conditions already put into either a checklist or an email template that you're going to have ready for the customer. And remember, as you are, I just see this where it says proactivate. That's not even a word. All right, so I'll have that fixed. But anyway, you want to be proactive versus reactive. If there are conditions that you're seeing over and over and over again, those are conditions, those are requests, items you can collect up front. You can tell the customer, hey, I need whatever. I need a copy of your driver's license. And you can say that's just because they ask for it every single time. I might as well get that up front while the customer is open to giving you a bunch of things. Go ahead and ask for that up front if you know that you're going to need it. And even if you don't need it, that's okay too. It's better to be proactive or proactivate or whatever that word is. Be proactive versus reactive, and be sure to ask for help. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a human business. So that's what I like about it is we're still interacting with each other and asking for help. Okay, so we're going to always keep it going, right? So use this as a foundation for your continued learning. This is still self-training. We know that a lot of loan officer assistants, you're going to have to train yourself. So like I said, create your own sort of condition checklist of things that you see all the time. So as you get conditional loan approvals, you may want to keep them as a reference tool to see, well, how did I handle that last time? These are the notes I took, and I'm going to keep these while I get used to seeing conditions and understanding what are the things that come up all the time. So create your own checklist of things that you see all the time. Keep your old approvals as a reference. Remember to ask your team players in your community for help. And that's how you build your LOA muscles with every file, is getting used to seeing the same things over and over again. Repetition, repetition. That helps you with your learning. All right, so what we're going to do next in part 3 is how to talk to customers about conditions. And this can be a challenging conversation because, oddly enough, and I find it kind of funny, a customer comes to a bank or a loan officer and says, hey, can you loan me hundreds of thousands of dollars or maybe millions of dollars? And then when we say, sure, can you get us these documents? They're, what? I'm offended that you're asking for paperwork from me. So I find that kind of funny that they're asking to borrow a large sum of money. And not every client is like this, but this is some of the challenge, is speaking to people that may push back a little bit, or yes, they take offense if you're asking for certain items. So I'll share, some stories of some experiences I've had and how I've learned to navigate talking to customers with finesse, so that it makes you and your loan officer look good, and it actually wants your customer coming back again and again because they find the process less stressful and more seamless in dealing with you. So that'll be part 3, is having those conversations with your customer. All right, so please don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment inside our Skool community if you do want me to review a condition example that you have. So if you have a conditional loan approval and you say, hey, Tressa, I kind of want to go over it with you, or I want you to make a video going over my conditional loan approval, I would love to do that for you, but it would be done in our Skool community, and we can all take that as an opportunity to learn together. All right, you got this.